This first video was captured by a security camera at a home where a family had decorated their property for Halloween, placing several skull decorations along a wall to create a festive display that, at first glance, looks completely ordinary and exactly what you would expect during that time of year. At one point, a woman can be seen standing near the wall, casually adjusting the decorations and making small changes to their position, with nothing in the scene suggesting that anything unusual is about to happen. Everything appears calm, controlled, and entirely normal, right up until the moment something occurs that clearly wasn't part of the setup. Without any visible cause, one of the skulls suddenly begins to move. It doesn't fall or shift randomly like an object losing balance, but instead rotates in a controlled and deliberate way, turning as if it is actively looking towards something nearby. The motion itself is what makes the moment so unsettling, because it doesn't resemble something being pushed by wind or accidentally knocked out of place, but rather something intentional, almost as if the object is reacting to its surroundings. According to the woman who experienced it, there were no strings or mechanisms attached that could have caused the movement, and nothing in the environment that would explain why only that single skull moved, while the others remained completely still. What makes the footage particularly disturbing is not just that the skull moves, but how it moves, because the motion closely resembles something with awareness, rather than something influenced by a simple physical force. And that detail is what leaves the entire moment open to interpretation, because if there was no visible cause behind it, then the question becomes much harder to answer. What exactly made it turn in the first place? One thing is for sure, what makes that first video so unsettling is not just that the skull moves, but that it moves with what feels like intention. The next clip carries that same sense of awareness, only this time, it unfolds inside a home where one strange event quickly turns into several. A man from Missouri in the United States recorded what many people consider to be one of the most convincing examples of poltergeist activity ever captured on camera. It begins in a way that feels completely familiar. A quiet night at home, nothing out of the ordinary, just a man sitting alone, playing video games and unwinding. But without warning, that sense of normalcy is completely disrupted when something moves directly within his line of sight. The shift is subtle at first, but enough to immediately alert him that something isn't right. Realizing that whatever is happening could be significant, he grabs his phone and begins recording, trying to document what's unfolding inside his own home.
Bro, I'm playing fucking COD, and look at this fucking door. You cannot make this shit up. Look at this. Bro, nobody is home. My fucking family is in Cancun, bro. You gotta be kidding me. Bro! What the fuck? Bentley? Bro, are you fucking kidding me right now? Are you fucking kidding me right now? What the fuck? Bro! Holy... Why is this door open? What the fuck is going on?
When the clip is replayed, the amount of activity happening in such a short span of time becomes almost overwhelming to process. Right in front of him, the bathroom door begins to move, slowly and smoothly closing on its own. There are no cuts, no edits. This is a continuous shot, making the movement even harder to dismiss as a trick. When he finally builds up the courage to approach the door and push it open, the room inside is completely empty. But the moment he steps inside, the toilet flushes on its own, as if someone had just used it seconds earlier. The situation escalates further as he moves downstairs. A flickering hallway light immediately creates an unsettling atmosphere, but there is another detail that's easy to miss unless you're paying close attention. A door that was clearly open moments before is now fully closed by the time he reaches the bottom of the stairs. When he opens it, the sink faucet is running at full force, despite no one being there. And then, as he turns his camera toward the kitchen, the final detail becomes impossible to ignore. His back door is wide open. At that point, whatever explanation he may have been searching for no longer matters. The accumulation of events becomes too much, and he makes the decision to leave immediately, fleeing his own home in the middle of the night. What makes this footage so disturbing is not just one isolated moment, but the consistency of it all. Multiple events, happening in sequence, each one building on the last, with no clear explanation tying them together. Now, this next video was re-uploaded to TikTok, and while the original source is unknown, the footage itself has continued to circulate because of how unusual it appears. The story behind it is relatively simple. A mother returned home late one evening and left her son's bikes outside in the garden, thinking nothing of it. The area was quiet, everything seemed normal, and there was no immediate reason for concern. But not long after she went inside, her security camera sent an alert, capturing something that didn't make sense. In the footage, a small tricycle can be seen sitting motionless in the middle of the garden. There is no wind, no visible disturbance, and nothing moving around it. Then suddenly, the tricycle begins to move. At first, it rolls forward slightly, something that could potentially be explained. But then it stops completely, as if whatever caused the movement has paused. Moments later, the handlebars turn on their own, slowly adjusting direction, before the tricycle continues moving again, now along a different path. The movement isn't random or erratic. It appears controlled, almost deliberate, as if someone unseen is guiding it. And that detail is what makes the footage so unsettling. According to the mother, the tricycle had been completely still before this moment, and seeing it move in such a controlled way left her deeply shaken. Since then, she has refused to go outside at night. Some people believe it could still be explained by environmental factors, like uneven ground or wind patterns. But others argue that the steering motion makes that explanation far less convincing. Because if something can move, and then change direction, it raises a much more unsettling possibility. It leaves you questioning whether something invisible was guiding that tricycle. The next one raises a different kind of fear altogether. Not what can move in front of you, but what might be waiting far beneath you. The video was filmed on July 4th, 2013, and over time, it has gained massive attention online, accumulating more than 35 million views. The footage shows a team conducting a simple but intriguing experiment. They attach a small camera to a rope, equipping it with a flashlight to illuminate the darkness below, along with a pencil fixed to the front to protect the lens from impact against the walls of the well. A depth meter is also included, allowing them to track how far the camera is being lowered. With everything in place, they begin slowly descending the camera into the well, sending it deeper and deeper into a space that is completely hidden from view. At first, nothing seems out of the ordinary. The descent is steady, controlled, and visually uneventful. But then, at certain points, faint and unusual sounds begin to emerge from the darkness below. These sounds, while not immediately clear, have drawn comparisons to something far more unsettling. There are long-standing stories associated with deep wells like this one, claims that at certain depths, people have reported hearing disturbing noises, echoes, distant cries, or even what some describe as screams. These accounts are often compared to the legends surrounding the Kola super-deep borehole, where recordings allegedly captured sounds that were interpreted by some as voices or human suffering deep underground. Because of that, places like this have developed a reputation, with some believing they may connect to something far beyond what we understand. According to these stories, the sounds are not random at all, but something much more disturbing: the voices of restless souls trapped far below the surface. However, in this particular recording, nothing reaches that level of intensity. While there are unusual noises present, they are far more subtle, leaving room for interpretation rather than providing anything definitive. It's possible that the camera simply wasn't lowered deep enough to capture whatever others claim to have heard, or that the sounds have more natural explanations, such as echoes, air movement, or the acoustics of a deep, enclosed space. But even without clear evidence, the situation itself remains unsettling. Because when you lower a camera into a place that deep, a place where light barely reaches and sound behaves in unpredictable ways, you are entering an environment that very few people ever experience. And sometimes, it's not just what you see, but what you think you might hear, that stays with you long after the footage ends. Deep wells and abandoned places often unsettle people because they feel like spaces where something unknown could be hidden. But the next case is disturbing for a different reason, because it suggests that the unknown might appear not in some distant place, but in the middle of an ordinary family moment. One night, a mother decided to record a simple moment at home while playing with her young daughter, capturing what was meant to be nothing more than a warm, everyday memory between the two of them. At first, everything about the scene feels completely normal, lighthearted, relaxed, and filled with the kind of small interactions that parents often want to hold on to. But within seconds, that sense of comfort begins to shift. Out of nowhere, the little girl says something that immediately stands out, something that doesn't quite fit with the moment.
Bate, 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 bate. Oh, mamãe, eu sou filho de...
Ele também?
Ele.
Quem é ele? Ele é bom?
Ele.
Ele é legal?
É bem.
É pra chamar?
É.
Ele é bom?
É.
É legal?
É.
Então tá bom.
Ba.
É pra brincar com ele também?
Pode. Bate, 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 bate.
Tchau.
Tchau.
Fala pra ele ir embora.
Hã?
Fala pra ele ir embora.
Tchau.
The child calmly explains that there is someone else there with her. At the time, the mother didn't react strongly. There was no visible panic, no immediate concern. She assumed it was simply a child's imagination at work, something playful or harmless that doesn't need to be taken seriously. But as time passed, that moment began to feel different. The more she reflected on what her daughter said, the harder it became to dismiss it so easily. The context surrounding that night starts to weigh on her in a way it hadn't at first. Just a few months earlier, she had lost her son, and with that in mind, the meaning of her daughter's words begins to shift. What once sounded like imagination now feels much more personal and much harder to ignore. The idea that her daughter might have been seeing someone, not just anyone, but her younger brother, becomes something she can't fully explain away. For the mother, that realization turns what seemed like an ordinary recording into something deeply emotional. Because whether it was simply a child's imagination or something more, it raises a question that carries far more weight than the moment itself. Who exactly was the little girl talking about? When a child calmly says someone else is there, it creates a kind of unease that lingers long after the moment ends. The next footage, however, turns that unease into something more tangible, as a hotel employee witnesses movement where there should be absolutely nothing at all. A man working as a receptionist at an old hotel in Arizona began experiencing something that he still cannot explain to this day. According to him, the building itself already had a certain atmosphere, the kind of place that feels quiet in an unnatural way, especially late at night when most of the rooms are empty and the hallways are completely still. One evening, a coworker approached him and showed him something that had been happening repeatedly in one particular room, something they had both witnessed more than once but could never make sense of.
What the? Nah.
Yeah, cause let me hit it now. And
Yeah.
shut up.
Bro.
The bed appears normal at first, neatly made and untouched. But then, without any visible cause, something beneath the sheets begins to move. The motion is subtle at first, almost like a small shift, but it quickly becomes more noticeable, as if something underneath the fabric is pushing or writhing against it. Naturally, the man reacts. He reaches out and strikes the bed with his hand, expecting to feel or reveal whatever might be causing the movement. But the moment he does, everything stops, instantly. The sheets fall still, as if nothing had ever been there at all. What makes the situation even more unsettling is that this wasn't a one-time occurrence. He claims that every time he attempts to straighten the bed sheets in that room, the same thing happens. Movement beneath the surface, followed by complete stillness the moment he intervenes. And despite experiencing it multiple times, he has never been able to determine what, if anything, is actually there. Now for this next clip, we return to a familiar figure, American TikToker Win McPix, whose home has been the subject of ongoing reports of intense paranormal activity over the past year. According to him, what started as small disturbances quickly escalated into something far more aggressive, with sightings of dark figures in his hallways and objects being thrown without explanation. Eventually, the situation became too overwhelming, and he made the decision to leave the house entirely. In this footage, he is documenting what should have been a simple moment, packing his belongings and preparing to move out. But whatever had been present in that house didn't seem willing to let him leave without one final encounter.
All right, today's today. We are sick and tired of whatever's going on in this house. We are leaving. We've decided to move. Movers are here. They've wrapped everything up. We are packing out, and hopefully that's the end of it. This is a video that I really did not want to make, but you guys tell me. We are still moving in. It's been a couple weeks, but tell me if you are sharing this too, because I think I might be going crazy. There's no way, dude. Ooh. No. Nope. Not this again. Oh my gosh.
As Win carries boxes down the stairs, the atmosphere immediately feels tense. What stands out most is the sound, heavy, deliberate thumping coming from directly behind him. The noise matches his movement almost perfectly, step for step, as if something unseen is following him down the stairs. He turns around multiple times, clearly expecting to see someone there, but each time, the space behind him is empty. The moment builds towards something even more intense when he places the boxes down and prepares to go back upstairs. Just before a loud crash erupts from the basement, there is another detail that's easy to miss. A faint, distant scream can be heard, cutting through the silence in a way that feels completely out of place. panic takes over instantly. Wynn runs up the stairs as fast as he can, and the heavy thumping follows him again, this time faster, more aggressive, matching his pace all the way to the top. It creates the impression that whatever was in that house wasn't just present, but actively reacting to him leaving. And that raises a question that is difficult to shake. Was this simply residual noise and coincidence? Or was something actually trying to follow him out? What makes Wynn's footage so intense is how aggressive and immediate the activity feels, as though something is actively responding to him leaving. The next case is quieter though, far more subtle, but in some ways just as unsettling, because the movement happens so slowly that no one notices it at all until later. Sophie runs a TikTok account where she shares her daily life, including her relationship with her boyfriend, and up until this moment, there had never been anything on her page that suggested paranormal content or anything staged for attention. Everything she posted felt normal, grounded, and real. One night, the couple decided to do something completely ordinary. They wanted to rearrange their bedroom, moving furniture around and reorganizing the space, so they set up a phone to record the entire process as a time-lapse, just to capture the transformation. But when they later sat down together to watch the footage back, what they noticed was something neither of them had experienced in the moment. It appeared that they weren't the only ones interacting with the room. Take a look. At first glance, the clip looks exactly like what you would expect. Two people moving quickly around a room, focused on shifting furniture and organizing their space. But when the footage is replayed more carefully, something subtle begins to stand out. Direct your attention to the small cupboard positioned right beside them, specifically the top drawer. As Sophie and her boyfriend continue working, completely unaware of anything unusual, that drawer begins to move. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, it starts sliding open on its own. What makes this moment particularly unsettling is the nature of the recording itself. Because this is a time-lapse, what you're seeing is roughly an hour of real-time activity condensed into a much shorter clip. That means the drawer wasn't pulled open suddenly. It was moving gradually, inch by inch, over a long period of time. In real life, that motion would have been so slow that it would have gone completely unnoticed, even with both of them standing just feet away from it. So the question becomes difficult to ignore. Was this simply a loose drawer shifting under its own weight? Or was there something else in that room, something subtle enough to go unnoticed, but present enough to interact with the physical world around them? When movement happens slowly enough to pass unnoticed, it creates a very specific kind of fear. The fear that something could be there without you ever realizing it. The next case builds on that idea, but in a way that becomes much harder to ignore the moment the piano starts playing. A man named Carter had recently moved into a new house, expecting a quiet place where he could settle in and start fresh, but only a few days after arriving, he began to notice subtle things that didn't feel quite right. At first, it was nothing obvious, just faint, unexplained noises that could easily be dismissed, yet they occurred often enough to create a growing sense of unease that he couldn't ignore. That uneasiness eventually turned into something far more disturbing one night, when Carter suddenly woke up to the unmistakable sound of a piano playing somewhere inside the house. The music was clear, deliberate, and impossible to mistake for anything else, yet there was no one else there who could have been playing it. Still half disoriented from waking up, he lay there for a moment trying to process what he was hearing, before deciding he needed to check for himself what was going on.
Who's there?
As soon as he approached the living room, The piano abruptly stopped, leaving behind a silence that felt far more unnatural than the sound itself, as if whatever had been playing it had suddenly become aware of his presence. Even with that uneasy feeling, Carter stayed in the room, trying to make sense of what had just happened and looking for anything that could explain it, but nothing appeared out of place. Then, without any warning, the situation escalated even further.
Dude, what the f***?
The piano began playing again, just as clearly as before, but this time, it wasn't alone. The chair positioned in front of it shifted on its own, moving across the floor without any visible cause, as if something unseen had just taken a seat or pushed it aside. That moment was enough to convince Carter that whatever was happening was beyond anything he could explain, and he immediately decided to leave the house, rather than stay and risk experiencing anything worse. As he rushed outside, however, the activity didn't stop. From where he stood, he could see inside the house as the television suddenly turned on by itself, while the lights began flickering in an erratic and unpredictable way, giving the impression that whatever presence might have been inside wasn't confined to one room, but was affecting the entire house. Not long after that night, Carter made the decision to move out completely, hoping to leave whatever he had experienced behind him. But the events he witnessed remain difficult to explain and raise a question that still lingers. Was there truly something inside that house, or was it something that simply cannot be understood? With that question lingering, we head to this next video that feels even more dangerous, because this time the unexplained doesn't just move objects, it appears to throw them. A man in the United States uploaded a video to TikTok that quickly gained attention, not because of what it clearly shows, but because of how difficult it is to explain what's happening. The video begins late at night, with the man sitting alone in his living room, casually scrolling on his phone. Everything appears normal at first, quiet and uneventful, until he begins to feel something that he can't ignore. It's the kind of feeling many people have experienced at some point. The sudden and overwhelming sense that you are being watched, even when there is no visible reason to believe that someone is there. In his case, that feeling becomes strong enough that he starts to believe someone might be outside his window, looking in. So, he picks up his phone and begins recording, trying to capture whatever might be there.
Look, I'm really tripping out now. Something was looking at me through the window, and I heard I'm freaking out. I am tripping. There's something in this house with me. There's something in here. I'm telling you. No.
As he continues filming, his attention shifts toward the kitchen. At first, the changes were subtle. Objects on the counter begin to move slightly, just enough to be noticeable, but not immediately alarming. But within moments, that subtle movement turns into something far more aggressive. A kitchen knife suddenly launches through the air, traveling directly toward where he is standing. It misses him by only a small margin, striking the ground nearby with enough force to make it clear that this wasn't accidental. Before he has time to fully react, another object is thrown from the darkness, this time from a different direction, reinforcing the sense that whatever is happening is not random. The atmosphere changes completely. What began as curiosity quickly turned into fear, as it becomes clear that the activity is escalating in response to his presence. And that detail is what makes the situation especially unsettling, because if something was watching him before he started recording, and then began reacting once he acknowledged it, it raises a question that is much harder to dismiss. Was he dealing with an intruder hiding just out of sight? Or something that didn't need to be seen at all? Either way, that attack was frightening, because it feels like an active presence in the room, moving with force and direction. The next clip creates a different kind of unease, one built not on aggression, but on the brief appearance of someone who seems to exist only in the mirror. A young man, while on vacation, chose to stay in an old hotel located far from the city, surrounded by forest and isolated from the usual noise and activity of urban life. The setting itself already carried a certain unease, the kind of quiet that feels heavier than it should, especially in unfamiliar surroundings. At one point, he began casually filming inside his hotel room, not intending to capture anything unusual, but simply documenting the space around him. However, when he later reviewed the footage, he noticed something that he had not seen at the moment.
Guys, arrived in the hotel of Lucknow. Lucknow.
In the reflection of the mirror, a figure appears. It resembles a woman, but her appearance is pale and distorted, standing in a position that suggests she is inside the room with him. The moment is brief, but clear enough to stand out. When the man turns the camera away from the mirror and toward the rest of the room, there is nothing there. No one standing where the reflection suggested someone should be. The space is completely empty, and yet, the figure does not appear anywhere else, only within the mirror itself. At the time of filming, he hadn't noticed anything unusual, but after seeing the footage, the realization left him deeply unsettled. He maintains that he was entirely alone in the room, with no one else present. Which raises a question that is difficult to answer. Was it simply a visual anomaly, or something that could only be seen through the reflection? Now that was all for today, folks. If you enjoyed these horrifying clips, click to see more on the video on screen.